Hey Goose, Captain Al here. We'll see if this works or not. I'm going to try to use Observer Studio and PowerPoint to give you Goose's guidance for your 747-400 Miami trip. So these are the questions you had, and I'll go through them one by one. First things first, you are going to be well prepared, and I think that for sure because you've been at it for a while. You've read the FCOM, you're going through my videos. I think you're going to be pretty doggone prepared for this, and so all your work will pay off, certainly. The normal start sequence for Boeing is 4, 3, 2, 1. Using auto start, it'd be start engines 4 and 3 together, and then 2 and 1. If you had no auto start, or you're doing a manual start because the auto start isn't operative, then you would manually start engine 4 and then engine 3 and then engine 2 and engine 1 separately, because you have to keep your hand on the fuel control switch and monitor parameters. And why do we do this? Primary reason is to pressurize, like you said, the normal brake system first. Some airlines do 4, 1, 2, 3. We used to do that at Northwest. Boeing 4, 3, 2, 1. Northwest was 4, 1, 2, 3. Delta is probably 4, 3, 2, 1 now that they took over Northwest, I'm sure, because they go more by Boeing. The second reason we do it is just because of standardization standards. If you have to do a ground pneumatic start because the APU is inoperative, and then push back, disconnect everything, push back and do a cross bleed start, you're doing engine number 4 first anyway. And probably the third reason, in order of importance, is probably it's the side away from the jetways and vehicles and ground staff. So usually starting number 4 at the gate is a better proposition than starting number 1. You could start any sequence, but typically it's number 4 to pressurize the normal brake system, which makes sense. The nose cargo door is electrically driven. The power for the control and actuators comes from the main deck handling bus, not the ground handling bus. I think you had that written down somewhere, that you had ground handling bus, I believe, which is, I think that's what you had. I forget your question. But the main deck handling bus is the normal power source rather than normal AC buses. And of course on the freighter that'll be external 2 or APU 2 on the freighter, either one. If you have external 1 on and you have external 2 on, and that means selected, then you would have one power source, and that would be just external 1 and external 2. And in that case the main deck handling bus would not be powered. It has to be available but not powered. So on a freighter that would not be okay. On a passenger jet, it would be fine. There's no reason you can't put on external 1 and external 2 with just that one power source being external. But on a freighter, you want to put on external 1 and keep external 2 available, because that way the main deck handling bus stays powered, and that way you're not going to get a nasty look or a nasty curtain knock from the loadmaster. He'd probably just look at you from the left side and go, "What's going on?" and raise his hands like, "What are you doing?" So yeah, that comes from the main deck handling bus, external 2 or APU 2. The flight deck floodlights are on the ground service bus, not the ground handling bus. That's the one you were thinking of, ground handling. And it's AC1 powers the ground service bus normally. However, if you don't have AC1 available, then you have that ground services bus switch, which will power the same source as what's powering the ground handling bus. So if you have external 1 or APU 1 on for the ground handling bus, and you push that ground service switch, that will give you external 1 or APU 1 to power the ground service bus. And that's so they can do things like vacuum and turn some lights on, things like that. On the passenger airplane, that's located at door 2 left. And on the freighter, it's the upper deck crew area where they have that, I forget what it's called, but they have like a console that has all the lighting and stuff like that. Where the emergency equipment is mounted on there too, a lot of it. It's kind of like a pedestal, and that's where you would find that switch on the freighter. Yes, you have to depress the brake pedals, assuming you have accumulator pressure. Depress the brake pedals and then pull up the parking brake handle and then release the pedal pressure, and then the handle stays up. And of course, when you want to release the brakes, you just push the brakes and then the handle will pop down. If you need to pressurize the normal brake system because the accumulator's out, you could take the number 4 system and go to aux, and then that would pressurize the normal brake system, and you would not have to get permission from ground to do that. You're just pressurizing the normal brake system. You're not going to move anything else by going number 4 to aux. And sometimes that will wear away over time. I think that's your next question. A fully charged accumulator, yeah, 12 hours if you are really, really lucky. And that means if the airplane's new and everything's good, and that'd be the max. It's more like 8 to 12 hours depending on how old the airplane is and how the accumulator is aged and whether it can hold that. So during long periods on the ground, of course, we always want to be chalked, and we never depend on the accumulator to hold us in position unless it's just stopping, like if you're taxiing and you stop the airplane, you set the parking brake, that's fine because it's going to be a minute or two. But if you're going to be 4 or 5, 6 hours on the ground, you normally will be chalked anyway, and that's what we want because that accumulator will bleed off over time. The towing power switch, it's on the overhead maintenance panel. It's standard on the 747-8. You really don't find it. I think it's an option on newer 747-400s, but you don't find it on many. I don't think there's many that have the towing power switch at all. But this allows maintenance to, with the battery switch off, they can turn the towing power switch on, and then it uses the main and APU batteries without turning the battery switch on. And then it powers things like nav lights, brakes, cockpit lights, and the radio, the left VHF radio, I think, for taxiing. So it's mainly on the Dash 8, not on the 400. Probably something you don't need to worry about, but that's what that's all about. Doors electric, I don't know what that was. Probably just me hitting the wrong button, maybe, or it could have been a spurious thing with a simulator. You never know. But you said that flashed for a second, so I have no idea what that is. Could have been me hitting it and then realizing I hit the wrong thing and then hit it back to closed. Event record, you can do 5 automatic events and 5 manually can be recorded. And automatic events would be in a case of any exceedance that it feels that it needs to take a snapshot, then it'll take a snapshot. If you do a 6th event, it's going to replace the first event that you did. You can do up to 5 manually. And it records all kinds of stuff on the central maintenance computer pages. So there's all kinds of parameters in addition to engine stuff, flight controls, and probably all the CMC pages. Most of those it probably records. And as I said, it records the, if you do a 6th and it fills up, it'll just replace the first. APU fuel burn, it depends where you look. On the performance initialization page, you'll see calculated fuel, and that is going to be the totalizer fuel, and it separates itself when you bring the fuel control switch to run. So as soon as you start an engine, it's going to separate into calculated fuel. So that's based on fuel used or fuel flow. Whereas you'll have the totalizer fuel, which will be the sum of the fuel in all the tanks. That's reading it directly from the tank, from the fuel quantity indication system, the FQIS. And the progress page is going to show you both totalizer and calculated. So you could see the APU burn on the totalizer fuel. You just wouldn't see it, like if you were looking at it on the perf-init page, it wouldn't show, that burn, because that's calculated and you haven't started the engines yet. So totalizer is fuel sensed in the tank, corrected for all the stuff that it corrects for. And calculated is the totalizer, but as soon as you start the engines, it separates itself based on fuel used or fuel flow. So calculated and total will be different with the APU burn, and so depending on how long you've been burning from the APU, we'll see a difference. APU fuel burn, as far as I could tell, it's around 800 pounds an hour, I think, for electrics only. If you start adding packs to that on a hot day, you could as much as double that, like 1,700 pounds an hour. So again, at engine start, totalizer is going to be less than calculated if you've been burning from the APU for a while. And so you do have to account for APU burn if you have extended time for buffer fuel. That would make sense. Engine start, we normally turn 2 packs off. It doesn't really matter which packs. However, if you were doing if you're doing a ground pneumatic start, you're going to turn all 3 off because you want maximum duct pressure. But normally, you're going to start with 2 packs off. And technically, it doesn't matter which. However, we turn off 2 and 3, and most operators do, because 2 and 3 are turned off for various non-normals. You'll find that, like an overpressurization, pack 2 shuts down. If there's a cargo fire, pack 2 and 3 shut down. So there's different non-normals that will shut down pack 2 or 3. But pack 1 never shuts down for anything. So it's kind of like pack 1 rules. So we just normally, is more technique than anything else, turn off 2 and 3. But again, not necessary. You could turn off 1 and 2. It wouldn't matter, but most people do 2 and 3. Fuel panel shutdown, yes, you just leave it as it is. So if the cross feeds are open and you pull up to the gate, you just leave them open. If you had tank to engine in flight and you close cross feeds 1 and 4, then in that case you're going to just leave it like that. And on the next setup, the first officer, his job on the fuel panel is to open all the cross feeds. So you're going to open all the cross feeds, and then if you are tank to engine on that next segment, then when we do the before start procedure, you will see that the quantity is equal in all the tanks, nothing in the center, nothing in the stab, if you had a stab. And then at that point, you'd configure for tank to engine for takeoff. There's no concern about fuel migration if you leave the valves open. All the valves, all the cross feeds open. The fuel manifold is just a common pipe, so there's nothing that's going to move the fuel into another tank unless you have fuel pumps running. That's the only time it would happen. Your check ride questions, no, what was this in regards to? ACARs, yeah. No, you're not gonna touch that, not even in training. So, and certainly not on the check, because nobody expects you to have ACARs and take up that time with getting ACARs. That's a line operational thing, so you're not going to see that at all in training or the check. APU and operative in training, yeah, you're going to get that, or you should. And but because you do it in training, we normally don't do it on a check. You could have it on a check, it's possible, but probably not, because it's time consuming. And you want to get that check going because it's got a lot of things to do. So if you have auto start, you'd probably get something like a hung or hot start with an auto start, and then just go through the auto start, memory item, fuel control switch to cut off, and then call for the auto start 2 checklist or whatever. I can't remember if PIFA Sim the PIFA Sim does not have something in comparison with the Boeing Sim, and I think it might be auto start, but I can't remember. That might be a manual start only, because it may not have auto start. I could be wrong on that. There's something, though, that I know that doesn't have, and I can't remember what it is. If the ground crew calls you, you're normally going to get a chime, and you'll get the flight interphone call light is going to illuminate, and you could push flight on the audio control panel, and you'd be connected via the intercom system then. So if they call you, you're going to get the chime and see the call light on the audio control panel in the flight, FLT. And then you just push it and talk to them, or you could do your interphone switch on the audio panel too. If you call them, the freighter, there's two situations here. The freighter has a call panel, and pushing ground is going to sound the horn 3 times in the wheel well, nose wheel well. And the APU fire stuff, of course, is in the right body gear wheel well, but the horn for the thing is in the... if you call them, the passenger jet has a handset, and you dial a 2-digit code, and we use P1 in simulation, but airline codes can be pre-programmed. And this is all loosely simulated in training and checking. You're really just kind of pretending you're pushing a button and talking to ground, so it's not structured at all in training. So you usually don't have to worry about this too much. It's more operational. And that's it. And my wife is calling to get the groceries that she brought home. So I will see you later, Goose, and I hope this helps. Bye.